Welcome. It's a great honor for me to be here this year. This is the first chance I've had to do the Mediterranean event. I've been looking forward to it very much. This is me. This is how you can find me on GitHub and Twitter and LinkedIn and lots of other places. And I would love to hear from you. So please friend me or whatever the thing is, and I'd like to hear more from you. I'll just say that I work in a group called the API Academy through CA Technologies. It's a really fantastic group of people scattered around the globe, and our job is to help people build great APIs. So all the things that we do, these events and everything else, is all a way for us to learn more and to actually learn from you and pass that on. A current project I'm working on right now is actually writing a book on client-side hypermedia. I'm not going to say a lot about it, but it's sort of a departure for me. It has a great deal of code in it. I've been writing code every single day for the last 4 months. And I keep writing and writing and rewriting and changing and editing and writing and learning from so many other people that I share my code with. If you're interested, you can follow these tags, and it's something that will come up later in the year. But today, I don't want to talk about code. I want to talk about words. I want to talk about stories. So much of our lives, so many centuries, has really, what we've learned is through stories, through myths, through storytelling. And what I'd like to do today is to just simply talk about stories. In particular, I have this one idea in mind that I want to take you on an adventure. I want to tell you a story. The story is about a person who isn't really satisfied with the way things are today. Always looking for something better. There might be something greater on the next horizon. What could that possibly be? And they're willing to risk a great deal in order to find out what that is. So this story is, I hope, about you. So you live in this peaceful little village called Stacia, where everything works out great. Everyone works hard. There's time to enjoy life with friends and family. But the problem is, it's always kind of basically the same. There are new things to do, but the tools, the techniques, the basic ideas, they're always the same all the time. And this sort of bothers you. You think something's missing. In fact, in this village, there is this story about this magical city called Hyperion where machines talk to each other and things change every single day. Now, most people in the village think that that's a myth, and it's not even worth spending time on. But this is something that bothers you, that you think that there could be something better, something out there. So you decide that you're going to go find this magical city. And that means that you have to pack up everything you have and take it with you and leave the comfort of this village and go into this forest that's called the Great Expanse of time and space. It's kind of a strange name for it, but people tell you it's a very mysterious forest. It actually changes shape, changes size. Just when you think you're at the end of it, it grows even larger. And there's supposed to be all sorts of magical creatures as well. So you gather up every tool you have, some food and your clothes, you pack it all on your back, and you go out to the edge of the city. And there's a man who has this small little stall, and he motions you over. And he says, you're about to go on a very dangerous journey, and I have some essential things for you. And he hands you two things, a box, a small box, and it has a drawing, a very elaborate drawing of a smoking pipe on it and some strange lettering that you don't understand. And then he hands you this pile of yellowed maps, and he says, you'll need these. And you try to pay him, and he says, no, that's okay. You'll need these. Besides, you'll be back. So fine, you take all the maps and you put them in your pack, and you take the box under your arm, and you go to the edge of the city, you turn your back on the village, and you walk into the forest. And it turns out it is actually a very, very dangerous forest. It's confusing. There's trees and branches and rocks, and it's easy to fall, and it's easy to get lost. You spend all this time walking. You're not even sure. Everything looks the same. You think you're lost. Then you realize that the old man gave you some maps. So you reach into your pack, and you pull out these maps, and they're a little odd. They say things at the top of them like, go to the stream, find the big tree, these other strange names. And you look at these maps, and turns out they're not maps at all. They're very elaborate instructions. So you pick the one, like, find the big tree, and it says, face north and walk 3,000 steps exactly. Turn 15 degrees right and walk 500 steps. And over, and there's pages and pages of this. These aren't maps at all, they're instructions. They're step-by-step instructions, and they're incredibly hard to follow. And in fact, you're not even sure if you're doing the right things. And you finally get to where you're supposed to be at the big tree, and there's nothing but an old rotten log. So these maps are not only difficult, but they're probably out of date. Things have changed since somebody wrote all these instructions. It's very frustrating. You spend the rest of the day just kind of slashing through the woods, and you come to a clearing where there's a stream. And you decide to sit down and relax. And when you get to the stream and sit down, you notice there's this small little gecko running around. And he's doing a little bit over here and a little bit over there. And he looks at you and he says, it's going to be dark soon. You better get started. And he goes off again and he does a little bit more work. And you sort of strike up a conversation with Gibby. That's his name, this little gecko. And Gibby tells you that what he's doing is the same thing he does every day. He finds a place to hide in case there's a predator. He finds a place to place his food, somewhere to sleep, and a place for a sunning spot in the morning. And he does it every day over and over again. But every day it's a little bit different. Tomorrow there might be a log in front of his favorite hiding place, so he has to find a new hiding place. And he does this over and over, and he says, you better get started, it will be dark soon. He said, well, actually, it's a pretty good idea. You gather up some food, and you find a place to sleep, and you sit down, and you relax, and the two of you finally, it gets towards the end of the evening, you have your dinner, and you notice that the things that you found, like the amount of food is different than his. You need more food. Your hiding place has to be much bigger than his. And you sort of mention this to Gibby. And Gibby laughs and says, yeah, all the seekers say that on the first day. What I need, what affords me hiding, is different than what affords you hiding. We all have different affordances. And you're like, what is that word? What are you saying? And Gibby says, well, if I explained it to you, it would take all the fun out of it, wouldn't it? And he goes off to sleep. Before you sleep, you pull out that box the old man gave you. You look at it, and you turn it upside down. There are no handles, there's no hinges. You don't know how to open it. It's worthless. You put it back in your pack and you go to sleep. James Gibson, in 1986, writes a book called the Ecological Approach to Visual Perception. And in it, he coins the word affordance. In fact, he had created the word in 1984 in a paper, and this book sort of explains his idea. His idea is that the world around us has features that allows us to survive and thrive. And in his theory, there's our visual perception that helps us find the things that will make us successful. This is how creatures survive in an ecosystem. They find their niche, they find their affordances that allows them to survive. So he creates this notion, and I love this quote, an affordance is a quality of an object or an environment which allows an individual to perform an action. This is what we do every day. This chair affords sitting, this microphone affords that you can hear me. We have all these affordances around us every single day. Now in the morning you wake up and you start to look over your maps, deciding how you're going to deal with tomorrow. And Gibby looks at the maps and he laughs at you. He says, these aren't maps. The maps are not the territory. These are worthless. And you realize, you tell him, yes, I know they're worthless, but it's all I have. You pack up the maps, he laughs at you, and he heads off and he starts doing the same thing he was doing yesterday, finding a place to hide, a place to sleep, some food, and some sun. And you walk off into the forest again. Now this time, as you're walking through the forest, you start to think about things. This stuff is too complicated. You decide to start just looking ahead. You find a landmark, and then you go to that landmark, and you figure out how you're going to get there. You have to step around a rock or over a stream. It's okay. And you go landmark to landmark, and it's getting a little bit easier. And in fact, the day goes pretty well. Towards the end of the day, you come to another clearing where there's a big pot on a fire and a large workshop, and there's somebody in the workshop banging away and laughing. And it turns out, you look inside, it's this chimp, and her name is Dena. And Dena is banging at a workshop on a table, and then grabs another tool and runs to another table and does this over and over again. Finally, she notices you, and she says, come on in, grab a tool. Get started. And you say, well, I don't really know what you're doing here. And she says, I'm using tools. and she throws you something that looks kind of like a combination between a wrench and a saw. It's kind of odd. And you figure, well, okay, what the heck? So you start sawing or twisting or turning, and actually it starts to get kind of fun. And you start to join in, and you go from table to table and you just pick up whatever tool is there and you start using it. And what you don't notice is Dena has now gone outside and she's tending the stew. There's this beautiful smell that comes into the room. You go out and she's ladled up a bowl, and the two of you sit down in the evening and you have the stew. And Dena says, "You like my workshop, don't you?" And you say, "Yeah, actually, I really do. I didn't really realize how enjoyable these tools could be." And it turns out that Dena is a master tool maker. She designs tools for jobs. And she says it's very difficult to find just the right design for a tool to do both the job and be enjoyable. But it's my life's work, and it's what I do. And you think, well, that's actually a pretty good idea. So you sit down and you talk about these things, and she says, you know, actually all these tools afford me all sorts of possibilities. I have a rich set of affordances. And again, you hear that word again. And you ask her, what is this affordances? And she says, don't worry, you'll find out. And just before you go to sleep, you go pull that box out again and start playing around with it. And Dena looks at you like she knows what's going on, and she just smiles and turns over and goes to sleep. Now this time when you're sleeping, you have a dream. And the dream involves both Dena and Gibby in the workshop. And Gibby keeps running around, and he keeps yelling something about some phrase. Oh, shoot, I forgot the word that he's saying. Well, he says something about the nonlinear now, and Dena says something about causality, and it's very confusing, and it goes over and over again. And finally, you wake up in the morning, and already Dena is working in her shop. You greet her, and you sort of explain to her about the dream, and she stops, and she says, really, you've already had that dream. Well, maybe you're ready for the next challenge. She takes you out of the workshop. Behind the workshop, there's a long stone wall in both directions as far as the eye can see. She says, it's been here as long as I know, and I've been here a long time. But she says, it's been even longer since any of the seekers actually made it through the door. And you notice there's a door with the letter P on it. And apparently the last seeker didn't make it through the door because there's a skeleton holding on to the doorknob. So she says, go ahead, what you're looking for is on the other side of the door. And she hops up into a tree, and you look at the door and you think about it, you push away the skeleton, and you grab the handle, and you pull on it. Nothing happens. You pull on it, and it's still not working. You look, there are hinges, there's light, there's no nails. This is a real door. And Dena's just sort of laughing the whole time, and you're just really sitting there frustrated until finally you decide to grab the handle and push. And the door opens right up. And Dena laughs, and she claps her hands. She says, what a crazy affordance! And she runs off. And you look, and it turns out that the forest looks really inviting on the other side of this doorway. So you decide, you gather up all your things, and you walk through the door. Donald Norman in 1988 writes a book called The Design of Everyday Things. That's 2 years, by the way, after Gibson's book. And there's a reason for that, because Norman and Gibson had worked together. Norman takes the idea of Gibson's affordance and he expands on it. And he says that there are things that we have not just in the world, but also in our head, expectations about how things should work, how a tool should work, what it should work like, what the buttons do. These things are important to us. And he says designing great things is matching expectation with the external world. He becomes a father of human-computer interaction. He talks about the 7 stages of action in the action life cycle. It becomes very important when we write bots, because bots have to go through this process of the 7 stages of action as well. And I love this quote from him. The value of a well-designed object is when it has such a rich set of affordances that people who use it could do things that the designer never imagined. Think about that. Designers can't even imagine what's possible with the things that they build. It's really important for us to build things in such a way as that we do not limit the possibilities of our users to discover new things. So you walk through the door into the forest, and today the forest actually looks very inviting. It's almost like home. You don't worry about maps. You don't even hardly worry about the landmarks. You just walk along, and it's a beautiful place. It's actually very comfortable. It's not dangerous at all. You're enjoying yourself, and you decide to sit down at a big, tall tree, and you look up, and the very top of the tree, there's an owl sitting at a desk, writing frantically some papers. And the desk, it says Professor Arty on it. And he keeps writing and keeps writing, and then he looks down and says, "Hey, young fellow, what are you doing there? I guess you must have gotten past Dena's doorway." He said, "Yes, you have." He says, "Oh, that's very, very good." And you look up, and he keeps writing. "What are you doing?" He says, "What am I doing? I'm turning data into information. I'm making data usable. I have to represent it properly." And he keeps writing, and keeps writing, and keeps writing. It looks like he's been doing this forever. The trees are full of papers. And finally, it dawns on you, oh, information, that's right. Excuse me, by the way, can you tell me where the city of Hyperion is? And he says, "Oh, yes, yes, yes." And he looks through his papers, and he throws one down to you. And he comes down and he says, "Yes, all the information is right there." And it looks like garbage to you. You can't see anything. He says, "No, no, no, look inside. Look inside the data." And after a while, you notice there are some patterns, and you notice there are a couple of very important commands. It says, "reach fence, enter code, toggle gate." And as you say this aloud, Arty gets really excited. "Yes, yes, you found the affordances inside the information. That's excellent. Go, it's right down the hill." And you take off, and you go running. Roy Fielding, in 2001, is trying to get out of college. He writes his PhD dissertation on network architecture. It turns out he talks about two things very, very important. He talks about representing the state of a system and using hypermedia to change that state to something else. These are actually very novel ideas, and now even 15 years later, very few of us actually build business systems that follow his ideas. He talks about state and not objects, about transferring the state of the system. And I love this quote. He says in his dissertation, "Information becomes the affordance to which the user obtains choices and selects action." The information suddenly to Fielding is the set of affordances, is the space, right? So all of these things start to add up, start to come together. You run down the hill and you can see the city off in the distance. You find a gateway, and there's a gateway that asks you to type in some letters. It's 3 letters, and you don't really know what you're going to do. And finally, you remember what Dena said, and you say something about the nonlinear now, N-O-W, and you type it in, and the gate opens up. And you get into the city, and there's people and cars and bustling everywhere, and suddenly somebody yells out, "We have a seeker!" And everyone grabs you and starts greeting you and saying, "Oh, I'm so glad you're here. It's been so long," so on and so forth. You're wanted immediately in the control center. You don't even know what that means. But they hustle you through 2 big, wide metal doors into a room where there's a whole bunch of people typing furiously away at computers. And there's a leader who keeps barking orders about do this and do that and turn these on and turn those off. And finally, he notices you. He's the master command of protocol. It says MCP right on the top of his hat. And he says, "Oh, come here, we've been waiting for you." And he takes you over to his station. He says, "There." So, well, I don't know what to do. You say, "No, no, no, sit." The seekers are always nervous at first. "Go ahead, sit down." And he pushes the chair under your feet, and you sort of end up right at the terminal. And you notice it says all these files, and it says things like, "Go to the store and find the stream and find the big tree." And you realize, oh, so you say out loud, the map is not the territory. And all of a sudden, all sorts of screens start to change and things start to organize into a different sort of set of symbols. And everyone's impressed. Oh, this is really great. The programmers are really happy. The machines seem to be working a little bit better now. But then somebody yells out, "Now the machines are asking us to do things we never heard of before. What are we going to do?" And you're kind of at a loss, and the MCP looks at you, and he's waiting for something. So you just say, create new affordances, give them new tools, and everybody's really excited again, and all these symbols start to connect to each other, and things start to work smoothly and operate really well. And then finally, someone says, "But there's too much data. There's too much data. What are we going to do?" And the only thing you have to say is, the information is the affordance. And all of a sudden, everything brightens up, and everything calms down, and everyone claps, and you're the big hero of the room, and you have no idea what you've done. The MCP picks you up, takes you outside, and everyone pats you on the back and says you've done a fantastic job. And you walk outside to a much quieter street. going to throw in an extra person here, Alfred Korzybski, a Polish-born U.S. immigrant who in 1933 writes a book called Science and Sanity. And this is at the period between the wars, very optimistic. A lot of things about what Einstein was telling us and how the world is going to be a better place. This is before we have World War II, of course. And the idea here is that what Korzybski talks about is our language, our symbols, are actually the thing that cause us to view the world. He says the only possible link between the objective world and the linguistic world is structure. Structure of our language. Our abstractions actually decide what we see, not the other way around. Change your abstractions, you will see different things. And this works for programming as well. Programming is structure. Change the structure and you will see different things. It's a very, very huge book and I find it quite entertaining. All right, so the MCP says, so, you know, usually seekers stay here, but I sort of get the sense that you're going to leave soon. And you say, yeah, I think I need to go back home. This has been great, but I need to leave. And you say goodbye to everyone, and you start heading back. And you start heading back. And this time when you go through the forest seems very, very easy. And in fact, it seems even smaller. Somehow you can't understand why it was so big before. And you come upon Arty, the owl in his tree, and Arty says, so did you make it? And you say yes, and you tell him about all your adventures, and he says, well, then I helped you, didn't I? Said, maybe you have a gift for me. And you think, sure, and you pull out that box that you could never figure out, and you toss it up to Arty, and Arty says, oh, excellent. And he looks at it, and he says, "Si ce n'est pas un pipe." And you say, what? Well, that's what the lettering says. Really? I knew that thing was worthless. What does that mean? It means this is not a pipe. Well, fine, you can have it. And Arty turns the box over. He finds this little hidden spot, pops on it. The lid opens up. There's a beautiful pipe with some sweet tobacco in it. And he lights it up, and he says, thanks, kid. You say, okay, fine. And you go on, because you're not really done for the day. You walk through the woods a little bit more, and then you come to Dena in the evening. And she's already got food for you. She's already been cooking. She's been waiting for you. She's happy to see you. You tell her about all the adventures you have, and you decide while you're talking to her, all those tools that you've been carrying all this time, you give all those tools to Dena. You never used a single one of them. You never needed them. And she's just amazed. She says, oh, thank you. I have such a rich set of affordances now. Thank you very, very much. And you have your meal, and you say goodbye, and you keep walking, because there's one more place that you need to go before you go home. You go through the woods, and you find Gibby. And Gibby's doing the same thing that Gibby always does. He's running from place to place to place. And you say hi, and he says, did you make it? And you say yes. And he says, did you actually use the maps? And you say, no, actually, I didn't use the maps at all. Here, you can have them if you want. And he says, oh, this is great. I can use these to line the cave at night when it's wet, and I can hide under them, and I can wrap my food in them. All these different things I could do with these papers. You say, well, it's all yours, and you walk on. And really, it doesn't take long at all for you to get back to the city. And people are actually very surprised to see you. They didn't think you were ever coming back. While you think you've been gone only a few days, they say it's been several years. Apparently, that great expanse of time and space is a good name for the forest. And you tell them all the things. They say, so what did you bring back? And you say, well, actually, I gave everything away. Huh, right, okay. So where did you go? And you tell them all this stuff. And it turns out they don't really believe you. They don't think you've been anywhere. And it really turns out that most people think that you just imagine most of these things. Most of these things that you've learned. So, yes. So it turns out that many of the things that we learn are difficult to teach others, or difficult to get others to kind of believe unless they experience them themselves. We have so many opportunities to create the kind of web that we want to see, the kind of web where things can work the way we would like them to work. But most of all, it has to do with changing what we're looking for rather than what we're looking at. And this is a real challenge in our field, especially for those of us who spend so much time in what we think is sort of the hard realities of things. But words and stories and ideas are not hard realities. They're always pliable things. And the most amazing thing is, as you tell everyone in the pub about how great your journey was, and they all smile and laugh at you, every once in a while you can see in the eyes of some of the people that they too are thinking about taking a journey, that they're thinking about doing their own trip. And it turns out that this is not the end of the story, but only the beginning, and the beginning for all of us to become seekers and find ways to create a great information society with the computers and the technology that we have. And that's what I have. Thank you very much.
Yeah, a second applause for the slides.
Well, I will point out that these slides were actually designed by my daughter, who is a comic artist in Louisville, Kentucky, and she did a fantastic job. So I thank her very much. Yes.
So let's, yeah. So we have time for question if Ross is ready. Yeah. You're set up? Yeah. Okay, good. We have time for a few questions. So just before, who already knew about Hypermedia APIs before? Yeah, so let's say 25%. Well, okay. So Mike, yeah, you said you've been there. So you said in the story the guy has been there and nobody believes him.
That's right.
So
that's right.
Have you been there, or are you just imagine?
I think so. I've been a few places, and I have many more to go to. Yeah. I know. I honestly, very often I find that when I sort of talk about the things that I'm working on, people don't believe that, right? Or they think it's a myth, or they think it's a goofy idea. But I think many of us experience that. A quote that's attributed to Einstein is, if people think your idea is good, it has no chance. If people think your idea is way crazy, you have a slight chance. So very often we have to sort of embrace those things where people think we're a bit odd, because that actually may be the stuff that's very interesting.
Yeah, one question here. You take it, Baptiste.
I really like the analogies here, and I think
it's. Can you put it on,
yeah,
please?
I think it's on.
Sorry.
It's on.
Yeah.
It seems to me also a little related to if you're trying to teach a class of kids for an exam. One way to do it is to teach them all the facts A to Z, like every single one that you can possibly think of that they have to remember. Another one is to kind of teach them how to think for themselves in a given situation. And that second thing is often quite harder to do than the first. And we end up doing the first a lot. So in your story, how do you get the people that are in the city that don't believe to start to learn how to do that second thing?
Right. So the comment is that very often teaching facts is not always the best way to learn. Teaching how things are connected and how to discover and think for yourself, right? And how does that happen? And actually, that's the next chapter of the story. The next chapter of the story is how you take all that experience and turn it into something that you can share with other people. And I'll give you a little spoiler alert. It's through telling stories. So getting people to tell their stories and telling your stories and getting them to connect. Maybe I'll do that talk someday.
So maybe like say in 30 seconds or 1 minute, for the people that didn't know Hypermedia before, how would you kind of wrap it into like just a small explanation about about what it brings?
In the idea of Hypermedia, the response you get contains the answers to your next question. It tells you what you can possibly do next. How do I know when I get a JSON payload? What's readable and what's writable and what's searchable and what's not and what's related and what's not. In HTML, we do this every day, right? We add links in forms. But in all the other forms, we don't. We actually take away all of that power and we just give them plain data where you can't find the things to do next. And so you have to know ahead of time what to do. You're sitting with a pile of instructions that is code, and you're hoping that those instructions will be good forever, and that the tree doesn't die, or that things don't move, or a rock doesn't fall in the way. And that's the problem with writing code without affordance, without Hypermedia. Hypermedia is the affordance that lets you start to look around and find things to do. That's true.
The best explanation from the best who can do it, right? So yeah. So thank you, Mike. Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
I will. Oh, we have one more.
Oh, one
Okay.
more. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, hi Mike. So in your story you were talking about a door that had some confusion as to whether you push or pull it.
Yeah.
I'm working a lot with push systems, and I'd like to know your opinion about how REST might evolve in a world where information is increasingly pushed.
Well, if you look at what Roy, so the question is about push systems versus pull systems, or request response versus sort of event-driven or broadcast, right? So if you look at what Roy wrote about, Roy's thesis, dissertation is really about creating an architectural style that matches your problem. And he gives one example in REST, and then everybody uses it rather than actually creating a style that matches their problem. A person who I think had done a fantastic work on push systems is Rohit Kher, K-H-A-R-E, and he talks a lot about this, and Roy talks about push systems as well. So there are a great deal of power, and you can use just as much hypermedia in a push system than you do in a request response system. It wouldn't be called REST because Roy makes this design which says the first rule is it has to be client server, but it could definitely be an extremely powerful and valuable service. So I work in push systems all the time. There's lots of things where it makes no sense to wait around. You got to get information right away. And you can use just as much hypermedia as you like, whether it's XMPP or WebSockets or lots of other systems as well. We can talk about some stuff if you like. I'll be here all day.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mike.
Thank you very much. Thank you.